The Trump administration's reciprocal tariffs to be announced on April 2nd may be narrower and more targeted. So what does this mean? We ask our foreign correspondents. Welcome to Press Perspective for this Wednesday, March 26th here in Seoul. I'm Min Sunhee. We are counting down 1 week to the Trump administration's announcement of reciprocal tariffs. And given this time frame, today we address the latest regarding the U.S.'s trade policy and its broader ripple effects. For more on this, I have Celio Fioretti with French daily Le Croix here in the studio. Celio, welcome back.
Glad to be here.
I also have Professor Yang Jun-sok at the Catholic University of Korea with the pundit's take on today's topic. Professor Yang, as always, it's a pleasure to have you with us.
Happy to be here.
Right, Celio, we will start here in the studio. So let us start off with the Wall Street Journal's report that claims the Trump administration may narrow its tariff targets set to be announced on April 2nd. Do fill us in.
Exactly. The White House is adjusting its approach to new tariffs set to kick in on April 2nd. Instead of a broad industry-specific tariff, it looks like they're focused on targeted taxes for a selected group of countries that account for most of U.S. foreign trade. Trump has even called April 2nd Liberation Day. That's when he plans to roll out this new tariff, meant to match what other countries are imposing on U.S. Originally, he also promised tariff on industries like cars, pharmaceuticals, semiconductors, but now the White House says the sector-specific tariffs probably won't be implemented on April 2nd. We'll see maybe later. Instead, the administration is zeroing on about 15% of countries, 50% tariff on countries that have ongoing trade imbalances with the US. These countries are the G20's countries, plus Australia, Brazil, Canada, China, the EU, South Korea, and Japan, and a few more. And they will get hit with hardest with higher tariff also. This actually is a more scaled back version than what many people expected when Trump first announced this new tariff. In February, he announced like a very aggressive policy. Now it's a bit more nuanced, but it's the first step. We'll maybe have more later. At first, the idea was to sort countries into 3 categories: high, medium, and low tariff. But the White House has since scrapped this idea in favor of setting different tariff rates for each countries individually. The administration shift comes after a week of tough talk with U.S. trading partners. Officials from Canada and Mexico, for example, have been warned that there will be no possibility to escape this new tariff, although they hoped Trump would maybe negotiate with them. But also the domestic American industry officials have been told there will be only a few exceptions, if any, to this tariff. So American businesses are quite skeptical of the Trump foreign policy. So I think the game now for Trump is really convincing these American businesses that his way is the right. We'll see if he can manage that.
Right. Professor Yang, as Celio just mentioned, according to this article by the Wall Street Journal, tariffs on pharmaceuticals, chips and cars may be spared during the April 2nd announcement, despite Mr. Trump's earlier threats against these specific industries. How do you explain this latest backtrack? And Professor Yang, what are your thoughts on Mr. Trump's practice of issuing an ultimatum and then opting for a reversal with regard to tariffs?
Okay, well, the Trump administration's tariff policy has basically been unpredictable. So he's made bait and switch many times. In fact, once or twice he implemented the tariffs and then only a day or two later withdrew them. Originally, April 2nd was to announce reciprocal tariffs, some sector-specific tariffs, and reviews of existing trade agreements, as Celio just mentioned. But according to ABC News and Wall Street Journal, the Trump administration will likely forego sector-specific tariffs on autos, pharmaceuticals, and semiconductors that were planned for April 2nd. But I should emphasize that he did say that he will announce them soon, just not on April 2nd. What is this doing to the American economy? One of the reasons may be that the American consumers are very unsure about the desirability of tariffs. The expected inflation has gone up by 2 percentage points for this year. The longer-term 5-year inflationary expectations has gone up by a full percentage point. The Trump administration has not been successful in convincing the American public that the tariffs will not raise inflation by that much. So the fear of inflation and the chances of the popularity of Trump administration declining may be one factor in why the Trump administration keeps on changing their minds. Also, previously, Trump has said that he will put reciprocal tariffs on everybody and then negotiate downwards. That plan seems to have changed. Now he's implying that perhaps the countries that have trade deficit with the United States, if the countries that U.S. has trade surplus with, maybe they will not get hit with tariffs. He said that he will remain flexible, so we don't quite know exactly what Trump is planning and what Trump wants, and that's making the diplomatic response or negotiations by the trading partners very, very difficult. And then on the side of U.S. firms, this may be the biggest Achilles heel on Trump's economic policy, tariff policy. Firms find it very hard to make business decisions because, well, they don't know what the costs are going to be because the intermediate parts, the raw material that U.S. firms import to manufacture, well, the prices of those are unknown right now because we don't know how much tariffs are going to be put on, which countries are going to be put on, and so on. So the investment as well as consumption is very, very unstable right now. And I think that volatility, the fear of the future is making the Trump administration keep on changing their direction for the tariff policies.
Right. But against that backdrop, one Korean company has taken it upon itself to respond perhaps to Mr. Trump's tariff threats. Now, back on Monday at the White House, Hyundai Motor Celio announced a remarkable investment in the U.S. Could you fill us in?
Indeed, Hyundai Motor Group announced on Monday that it's pouring $21 billion into the U.S. economy through 2028, with Trump ramping up tariff threat to push for more domestic manufacturing. Hyundai is making a smart move. A big chunk of this investment, $6 billion, will go towards strengthening the U.S. supply chain for steel and auto parts. Hyundai is even building its first ever U.S. foundry in Louisiana, creating about 1,300 jobs. On top of that, the company is rolling out actually this week a brand new $8 billion auto plant in Georgia, expected to generate over 8,500 jobs. Basically, Hyundai there is just not just assembling cars in the US, it's creating an entire industrial network to build them there. And Trump, of course, loved the announcement. In return, he announced that that's the way Hyundai will be exempted from tariff, calling their investment a proof that his trade policy are working very strongly. The whole goal of Trump's tariff is to push the foreign companies to invest and relocate their production in the US to create products there, but also offer jobs to Americans. With this $8.6 billion expansion in the auto sector, Hyundai is gearing up to produce 1.2 million cars every year. And meanwhile, its new Louisiana plant will churn out 2.7 million metric tons of steel annually. And it doesn't stop there. Hyundai is also looking to deepen ties with U.S. companies in the future in industries and energy. As part of that plan, it's buying $3 billion worth of U.S. gas, liquefied natural gas, to help South Korea's energy sector, but also to support the American industry.
Right. And with regard to Korea's car industry, Professor Yang, back in February, I believe, China's state media published a piece about the remarkable resilience of Korea's auto industry against the backdrop of Trump tariffs. That being said, Professor Yang, what do you believe makes the Korean auto industry so resilient?
Okay, well, for the most part, I do agree with the analysis that was made by the Chinese press. I think the first advantage is Korea's labor resources. Korea has relatively large pool of engineers, large pool of high quality labor force, even though they can be combative sometimes, but they are a very highly qualified labor force, and they do their work very well. Then secondly, Korean automobile factories have up-to-date manufacturing facilities. It extensively uses robots and automation to reduce cost and improve quality. And then third, there's highly developed supply chains. This was what Celio was mentioning earlier. The Korean automobile companies are, even though when they outsource their parts or parts or raw material, it's virtually vertically integrated. So they have very close partnerships with the suppliers of intermediate parts and raw materials, and they can work together and they can try to reduce cost if some of these intermediate parts or raw materials prices go up. Conversely, if some of the suppliers are in trouble, then Hyundai Motors often help them out. So there is a very developed supply chain that Hyundai Motors seems to try to emulate in the United States. I'm not sure that's going to be possible because some of the imports are going to be subject to tariffs, but that's the goal. And then I think so, a bit of an overlooked element is that Korea has very competitive automobile market. The European car makers especially have made a lot of inroads into the Korean market. So Korean automakers have to compete with these European vehicles. And then Korea has FTAs with the major markets abroad. So they also have to compete in foreign markets as well. And because of the competition, they have to keep their qualities up and costs down. And I think that is a major factor on why Korean automobile companies are doing well.
All right, I see. Good to know, Professor. Meanwhile, Celio, on a more sobering note, an opinion piece by Reuters claims that the second Trump trade war may be, and I quote, more painful for Asia than the first. What were the reasons shared behind this grim outlook?
Indeed, the new tariff war might look a lot by the first trade battle back in 2018 with tariff on aluminum and steel, as we've seen already, and a back-and-forth approach. But that's where the symmetry stopped, according to this Reuters piece. And for much of Asia, it's not a good news. This time, the scale is much bigger, and more countries are in the crosshairs. Back in 2018, U.S. tariff as a share of imported goods jumped from 1.5 to 2.9%. If all the proposed tariff goes through and stay until maybe a few years, that number could shoot up to 9.5%. That's a massive increase in US revenue from the tariff. And another key difference this time, the Asian countries feeling the heat today are not the same as in 2018. The trade relationship have shifted, and almost every Asian economy, except China, is now more dependent on US exports. Many countries in Southeast Asia, for example, have heavily industrialized their economy and exporting massive amounts of goods to the US. That will be subject to tariffs. And even countries that have already industrialized before, like South Korea, have a high shares of exports going to the US, and it keeps increasing. In 2018, South Korea's share was 12%. Now it's 18.7%, and its trade surplus with the US has surged too. Of course, this impact won't be the same for everyone. India, for instance, has only 2% of its GDP from US trade. So even if the tariffs are high, they will not be impacted that much. But for countries like Taiwan or South Korea, which US is a major trading partner, maybe the growth will have to slow down because of this, and especially if the tariffs stick along for a long time. This new trade war will indeed spell a lot of trouble for Asian countries.
Right. Professor Yang, staying with what Celio has just said then, South Korea's export share to the US, as he just mentioned, expanded tangibly from 12%, Celio, I believe you said, in 2018 to almost 19% in 2024. How do you explain this rise, Professor Yang?
Okay, I think there's two elements to consider. The first is that China was Korea's largest trading partner from about year 2000 to Trump's first term around 2016, 2018. And why did the China's share fall? Well, partially it was because Chinese technology caught up to Korea. Korea used to export a lot of intermediate parts, but as Chinese technology improved, the Korea's exports of intermediate parts fell. And then
Professor Yang? Right, I'm afraid we've lost Professor Yang. We've lost the connection to Professor Yang. Now, while we wait for our connection to be made again, Celio, I will turn to you for now. Professor, you're back online.
Yes.
Right, I'm afraid we
yes.
lost you. Could you start again, resume from where we lost you? So you're talking about Korea's rise with regard to its exports to the U.S. market.
Yes, so Korea's exports to China fell, and that just mathematically brings the U.S. share up. And that, again, is because Korea is now exporting less intermediate parts, and Korea used to export intermediate parts for Chinese exports, but the trade war has caused some of that exports. And then in the last few years, there was the Chinese domestic economic slowdown. Whereas in the United States, since the pandemic, the United States was virtually the only major country which had very strong demand. And it's the only country which had more or less growth rates that were as strong or stronger than pre-pandemic. So the exports to U.S. rose because of that very strong demand, especially for manufactured durable goods. So as mentioned, the most durable jumps were in Taiwan, which rose from 11.9% to 23.5%, and Korea, which rose from 12% to 18.7%. Thailand and Malaysia made a significant increase as well. But I think the reason that Trump may put its attention into Korea is that compared to the Trump's first term and the second term, Korea's surplus with the United States, at least from U.S. calculations, has more than doubled. The U.S. deficit with Korea has risen by something like 125%. And during Trump's first term, Korea was not one of the top 10 countries which had trade surplus with the United States, but now it's ranked 8th. So that kind of change will put Korea into Trump's target range.
Right, I see. Celio, staying with what Professor Yang has said. Now, some pundits are saying that U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent last week described 15 trade partners of the U.S. as dirty, most likely because of trade imbalances, according to pundits. What are your thoughts, and which countries do you suppose, apart from South Korea, is he referring to?
As we mentioned earlier, the White House has narrowed its focus to this country-specific tariff, the dirty 15, as he said. The term coined by the Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, referred to countries that have long-standing trade imbalances with the U.S. If the name sounds familiar, by the way, that's because it's a play on The Dirty Dozen, a classic 1967 war movie. May not have the same catchy ring to it, but the Dirty 15 could soon maybe become a catchy phrase that will last long in the trade policy sector. According to the Wall Street Journal, this shift in strategy came after internal debates within the administration. Instead of broad tariff on entire industries, they're looking to target specific countries. Scott Bessent explained that this list is not just based on direct tariff this nation impose on U.S. goods. In some cases, like Europe, it's more about hidden barriers, such as regulation and VAT system, which Washington sees as unfair obstacles to trade. So who's on the list? As I mentioned a bit earlier, G20's countries, some Asian countries like Japan, South Korea, but also Vietnam, and also other strong economies like India, Russia, Brazil, or Canada. According to CNBC, the goal is to tax not just countries that impose duties on U.S. goods, but those indirect barriers that I just mentioned earlier before. the US will calculate the total cost of these trade barriers for American exporters and assign each country a number that will define the tariff they will be hit by. From there, the negotiation will start with each country individually to lower its tariff, but they will have to make concession in return.
Right, and speaking about bilateral discussions on trade, Professor Yang, we've been saying that South Korea can leverage its shipbuilding industry with regard to its discussions with the US on tariffs. How significant, Professor Yang, is our shipbuilding industry?
Okay, well, looking at 2023 statistics, that's the latest we have so far. China has the largest share of the global shipbuilding market, 51%. Korea is the second largest, it has 28%. Japan is ranked third at 15% of the global market. So these three countries take about 91% of the total global shipbuilding market. But if you go down to fourth and fifth, their share really falls drastically. The fourth largest shipbuilding country is Philippines, but they only take less than 1% of the total market. So basically, it's China, Korea, and Japan. But for obvious reasons, China is not looked upon as something that some country that U.S. can depend on. Japan specializes in mid-size, specialized ships. So if you want to focus on larger ships, then Korea is virtually the only country, especially in the Asian region, that can take the demand. If you exclude China. And Korea also has expertise in some specialized ships like LPG transport, oil transport, which President Trump has keen interest in. And also Korea has a rising defense industry. So if the U.S. wants to service its ships in Asia or even make some ships, then Korea is the natural partner for that kind of endeavor. Why can't the United States make that ships? Well, United States does have some capability to make naval ships, but overall for shipbuilding, the efficiency, the cost is really large. The cost of making ships in the U.S. Is about 30 to 40% higher than China, maybe about 20% higher than Korea. And part of that reason is that ironically, U.S. protected the shipbuilding market for about 100 years. Jones Act, which came in 1920, that protected a part of the shipbuilding market, domestic transport to only United States ships, and that actually made the shipbuilding industry in the United States very inefficient. And now a lot of them are seeking foreign investment, and that may be part of what Trump wants as well, Korean shipbuilders to invest in U.S. shipbuilders to try to rescue them.
Right, I see. So we may really tangibly be able to use our shipbuilding industry as leverage in talks with the U.S. Then we'll keep our fingers crossed for that. Professor Yang, as always, thank you so much for your insights.
Thank you.
And Celio, thank you very much for your time and your thoughts. Right, well, that ends this edition of Press Perspective. Thank you for watching and see you same time tomorrow.